Hello everyone. My name is Leiko. This channel introduces things you should know about Japan and Japanese people for those who are interested in Japanese culture and customs, and those who are thinking about traveling to Japan. I provide information unique to Japan, such as culture, food, art, lifestyle, and tourism. A friend of mine was getting married. Our friend is also Japanese and I met her while studying abroad in Los Angeles. My friend at the time, Susie, was in Japan for work, so we both attended. The bride looked beautiful in her wedding dress, and we got excited talking about it on the way home. But what moved Susie the most was when she saw a bride in a pure white kimono at another wedding. She was so captivated by her beauty, which she had never seen before, that she took countless photos from a distance. I explained to her that everyone wears that kind of attire at Shinto weddings. Our friend's wedding was in a church, so she was wearing a wedding attire. I was then confused by a question Susie asked me. Why do Japanese people have their weddings in churches? I've seen and attended many weddings, but I'd never thought of it that way. But now that I think about it, Susie's question is quite reasonable. When I explain this to people overseas, they can't believe it at all. Even though the couple are not Christians, even though they are pagans, they can have a wedding ceremony in a Catholic church. This is only possible in Japan. It is 100% not allowed overseas. So why can Japanese people who are not Christians have a wedding ceremony in a church? So today's topic is, why do Japanese people have weddings in churches? And I'll try to answer Susie's question. This is the number of Japanese people by religion, as surveyed by Japan's Agency for Cultural Affairs. It is said that many Japanese people are non-religious, but if you look at their family homes, you will likely find that they belong to some religion or another. If you think about where your family grave is, you will find the answer. If you are non-religious, that means you do not have an ancestral grave. It might be better to say that you are non-believing rather than non-religious. However, even if you say you are non-believing, you will still visit your ancestors' graves and pray at shrines to pray for worldly benefits. To begin with, Shinto does not have a universal scripture, nor does it have a specific founder. Because it has no doctrine, it does not proselytize or preach like other religions. Should it be called a religion? Perhaps it cannot be called a religion by Western standards. It is perhaps closer to a custom or culture than a religion. And this is the breakdown of wedding ceremony styles. Christianity accounts for only 1% of believers, yet 50% of weddings are Christian style. The opposite is true for Buddhism, where 40% of believers are Buddhist, but only 1% hold weddings in that style. It's certainly unheard of to have a wedding in a temple. I tried contacting my mother back home, and she said it was a church ceremony. My grandmother happened to be nearby, so I asked her about it, and she said it was, of course, a Shinto ceremony, and that only celebrities could have a church wedding. I forgot how many years ago that was. Here's a brief explanation of each wedding style. A church ceremony, as you know, is a ceremony in which the couple walks down the aisle in a wedding dress and makes vows to the Christian God. Shinto weddings are based on the idea that marriage connects two families, and are a style of wedding ceremony in which a Shinto priest and shrine maiden bring the two families together. The bride and groom offer tamagushi, sacred branches, to the gods. The tamagushi is placed on the altar by the priest. The bride and groom recite their vows. Sansankudu, exchanging sake cups. The bride and groom stand and receive sake from the priest. By exchanging sake cups, they forge a strong bond between families. Katame no Sakazuki, solidifying sake cup. Exchanging sake with relatives. The priest pours sake for all family members. Buddhist wedding. The most common place to hold a Buddhist ceremony is at the family temple where the ancestral graves are located, or at a temple the person has a connection to. Of course, if you have a Buddhist altar at home, it is also possible to call a priest to hold the ceremony at home. I have never seen or heard of this. Wedding attire. Women wear a traditional white kimono called a shiramuku, which is worn at Japanese weddings. This is the most formal wedding attire in Japan. Pure white symbolizes purity and new beginnings, and also signifies the bride's ascension to the family traditions of her new home. This is often paired with a white headgear called a wataboshi, which is believed to hide any jealousy or anger and help the bride behave like a good, obedient wife. The crested haori and hakama, for men, is the most formal Japanese attire for modern men. Civil wedding, non-religious wedding. This style has become increasingly popular recently. Rather than making vows to gods and Buddhas as in church or Shinto weddings, this is a wedding style in which the couple pledge their love in front of all the guests attending the ceremony, who act as witnesses to the wedding. Because there is no need to worry about religion or formality, the bride and groom are free to decide things like the progression, production, and vows, making it easier to express their individuality. Costs can be kept down by renting out a familiar shop or restaurant instead of a hotel or banquet hall and charging a fee for the entire ceremony. However, if there are many relatives, some may be concerned about appearances and not be welcomed. Also, if business associates are invited, they may be seen as less important, so it is not suitable for those looking to show off a certain level of status. Shinto weddings, which emphasize the connection between family and family, have fallen out of favor, and Christian weddings, which express the bond of love between individuals, and civil weddings, which are an even more casual format, have become popular. However, even though public weddings are on the rise, it is unlikely that they will increase any further, considering the social status and prestige that weddings carry. So, we decided to look into how Japanese wedding styles have changed over time. There's no point in looking into things that went back so far, so we looked into things from the Meiji period onwards. Based on the idea that marriage connects two families, the tradition of a woman leaving her family to join her husband's home continues to this day, and even before the Meiji period, home weddings were common, where the bride would go to her husband's home in her bridal attire, hold an engagement ceremony, sakazuka-goto, and hold a celebratory banquet inviting relatives and acquaintances. With the introduction of Western culture during the Meiji period, Japan also began to seek more formal beauty in weddings. The Shinto wedding ceremony, where a ceremony is held at a shrine modeled after Western weddings, was born and became established as a style of Japanese wedding. This Shinto wedding began when Ito Hirobumi recommended a Shinto ceremony for the wedding of what would later become Emperor Taisho, with the goal of promoting simple, solemn weddings nationwide. Ito Hirobumi was Japan's first prime minister and laid the foundation for Japan's modern nation-state. His portrait is also featured on the 1,000 yen bill. This Shinto-style royal wedding, held at the Imperial Palace in 1900, was featured in the newspapers, leading to widespread adoption across Japan. One reason for this was that weddings could now be held in hotels and halls. This was the birth of the prototype of today's hotel wedding, combining the ceremony and reception with in-hotel beauty treatments and photo shoots. As the Showa era began, hotels and halls across the country began to open modern wedding halls on their premises, and the format of weddings that we see today began to take shape. Amidst this, the dress worn by Audrey Hepburn in the 1954 film, Roman Holiday, captured the attention of women all over Japan. This film aroused a strong desire for the Western lifestyle, and in particular wedding dresses. The image of church weddings began to take shape through the film. Even more envious of women were the entertainers who graduated from missionary schools, who became a hot topic as people holding church weddings. Scenes of these entertainers holding their weddings in the churches of their alma maters were widely reported in the media, and church weddings began to gain recognition. The people born during the baby boom of the late 1940s reached marriageable age in the early 1970s, and a marriage boom broke out in 1972, with over 1 million couples getting married, the highest number since the war. At that time, many people hoping to get married contacted churches directly, and in response to this situation, the Catholic Church began to take serious steps to revise the rules, even seeking permission from the Pope. In 1974, the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Japan applied to the Pope for official permission to perform weddings between non-Christians. In response, on March 1, 1975, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith granted special permission to the Catholic Church in Japan to perform weddings between non-Christians, but only for weddings held within the country. At that time, several strong powers were issued. Not applicable outside Japan. Mass not permitted. Trial permission. A traditional Catholic wedding ceremony involves the bride and groom and other guests taking a bite of bread to represent the flesh of Christ and wine to represent the blood of Christ. One of the conditions was to omit this ritual, shortening what would normally take over 2 hours to about 20 minutes. Furthermore, it's true that this trial period has been ongoing for a long time. By the way, Protestants, who account for more than half of Christians in Japan, are a relatively new denomination and are not a single global organization. Therefore, they apparently leave it up to the discretion of each church. This makes them even more flexible than Catholics, who value their history. Non-believers can hold weddings, and remarriages are acceptable. As a result, church-style weddings surpassed Shinto weddings in the 1990s, and now roughly half of Japan's weddings are church-style. Why is Japan being given special treatment? Globally, Japan is the only country in the world where the Catholic Church has been given permission by the Vatican to perform wedding ceremonies with non-believers. The reason why this special permission was granted only to Japan, even though it was on a trial basis, lies in Japan's unique religious background. At the time, Catholics in Japan accounted for only 0.3% of the total population. In this situation, the Catholic Church in Japan highly values weddings between non-Christians in the church as an ideal opportunity for evangelization. From the perspective of building a church open to all, this is seen as an opportunity to gladly welcome those who knock on the church's doors seeking God's blessing and to convey the sanctity and profound meaning of marriage. While the Catholic Church has strict doctrine, the special exception for non-believers' weddings in Japan demonstrates how its universal doctrine can be adapted flexibly for the purposes of mission when faced with specific local cultures and social circumstances. Although there was criticism from within the church afterwards, the church continues to maintain this special permission to this day, and continues to play its role as a point of contact between religion and society, based on the spirit that we cannot refuse those who knock on our doors seeking God's blessing. However, Japanese people are rational, and holding a wedding in a church is not an expression of faith. Most people who have church weddings are not Christians, and do not become believers after the ceremony. Current situation and future challenges. Church weddings in Japan are a cultural phenomenon uniquely Japanese, combining the solemn religious ritual of Christianity with a commercial event that embodies a longing for the West. This is a classic example of superficial cultural adoption, where while Christian forms are actively adopted, the essential aspects of the faith and doctrine underlying them are not necessarily deeply embraced. In other words, for Japanese people, weddings are not religious events. There's also the chapel system, which is unique to Japan. Churches were built as Christian worship facilities, with a pastor or priest on site and a place of prayer for believers. Originally, a chapel referred to a small chapel and was not necessarily associated with any particular religion. They are used for general purposes, such as weddings and prayer, and are characterized by their lack of religious overtones. For this reason, many were built specifically for wedding venues, and are attached to venues, hotels, and schools that accept weddings of any religion. And because they are built and run for commercial purposes, everything is paid for, and naturally, they advertise in the media. Another problem is that surprisingly many pastors and priests are not real pastors or priests. In some cases, English teachers or international students officiate on weekdays as part-timers. When I asked a Christian friend about this, he laughed and said, "That's because it's a new denomination." In other words, commercial chapels seem to be seen as a new sect of Protestantism, which makes me think that they might be able to survive tenaciously even if Catholicism cuts them off. Today, an American friend who attended a friend's wedding asked me, "Why do Japanese people get married in churches?" So I decided to do some research on the matter. I had never even thought about it until I was asked the question. I think most Japanese people accept church weddings as a given, without any questions. However, it seems that Christian believers were surprised by this. I never imagined that the Pope would give special permission just to Japanese people. I will probably get married someday, but at the moment I'm not sure whether to get married in a church or at a shrine, and I'm open to both. I saw the bride's wedding dress and her white kimono at this wedding, and both were beautiful. I'd like to take my time to think about it until that day comes. Thank you for today. Please look forward to the next video.